5 seconds. Mr. Chairman, as we are aware, for several years in the past, I had been intimately interested in the financial and economic problems of my country. I am glad that this conference has been devoting a great deal of attention to the problems of inflation and recession in which the world has been so intensely and seriously involved during the last few years. My interest in matters of finance and economics has been both official and personal. In the international sphere, I have followed the apprehension and concern the devastating effect of inflation combined with a persistent recession which caused a steep fall in the prices of commodities and created continued monetary instability. This has been given a severe jolt to the economy of so many countries throughout the world, whether they are developed or developing countries. Although the sudden increase in oil prices and subsequent further doses of increase have been among the main contributory factors, in my view, national policy and trade and monetary field cannot be completely absorbed from blame. We are therefore today face to face with a problem which, though a legacy of the recent past, is demanding urgent attention. The problems are with us and will continue to plague us in future. Prudence dictates that the process of recovery has to be brought about of a wider front. Even though it has begun in developed countries, it is still weak and flattering in many of those economics. So far as developing countries are concerned, it is not only a question of recovery, it is a question of survival. The developing countries themselves do not present a uniform picture. The poorer among those which are commonly described as a non-oil developing countries have been very seriously affected, and as time passes their plight is going to worsen and not improve unless collective and cooperative action is expeditiously taken to pull them out of a grave and persistent situation. Their collective balance of payment deficit, which was in the region of $9 billion per year in the early 70s, has reached an appalling dimension of between 30 to 40 billion dollars. Earlier, developed countries had also run into such deficit, but they had in their favor strength and resilience of their economies, their measure of mutual help, and large access they had to liquidity provided by International Monetary Fund held them considerably to bear shock. It is quite obvious in the circumstances that the developing countries would find themselves in unavailable situation. On the one hand, their economy has further grievously worsened during the last 6 or 7 years for reasons not only beyond their control but also beyond their capacity to retrieve. On the other, their own economic strength has substantially diminished. My submission, Mr. Chairman, is that it is not out of charity that opaque and developed countries have to pull them out of despair and despondency, but that call of humanity and demand of brotherhood. both of which must appeal to a commonwealth gathering like ours, require that their problems revive sympathetic consideration and are meaningfully solved with little delay as possible. These countries are the victims of history and crisis after crisis has overtaken them while they were still finding their feet after securing freedom from colonialism and exploitation. Political issues, however, important pile into significance when measured against global challenges as well as opportunities in the economy of the next 2 decades. These opportunities have to be taken advantage of in turn, otherwise, they will slip beyond recall. The relations of today or tomorrow between nations are going to be determined not so much by political accord and accommodation as by the manner in which they can be helped to avoid the economic strains and stress. The problem of poverty, unemployment, and underemployment, and of removing inequalities in a world which is becoming more and more aware of gaps and shortcomings and more intolerant of failures and shortfalls in the performance are placing a grim burden of responsibility of government with limited resources at their command. For several years, the world community has made loud professions of containing the expansion of poverty and reducing its incidence. For several years, a search for the eradication of poverty and through its elimination of a major threat to world peace and stability has been going on. May I remind this gathering that empty stomachs are no respecter of persons or institutions. However, never international economic order about which many pious sentiments have been expressed since the sixth special session of the UN General Assembly must not be allowed to remain an utopian dream. For the time being, it is the only answer to the problems that we have been discussing. It is a realistic and indeed a necessary goal if we are to survive the elemental problems which threaten us and thus reach the goal of an international society based on the concepts of equity, sovereign equity, interdependence, and justice for the welfare of the people of this country.